I used to be obsessed with wanting to know as much music theory as possible, but over time I realized that applying it and really making music with it was much more important. But the problem with this though was that it felt like it was just taking forever until I had this realization that sped things up a ton. So the first thing to be aware of are similarities. And a good example would be the CAGE system, which if you don't know what that is, it's just an acronym for C, A, G, E, and D. So those open chord shapes. And if you take, say, the E shape, which is by far the most popular, and you change the finger like this, pretend a bar down here, move it up 1 fret, boom, there's an F in the E shape, and you can move it around anywhere. There would be A in the E shape because this is an A. So this is the thing I call cut and paste. And you can really leverage, what you know and leverage how the instrument is laid out, how stringed instruments kind of work, So you can take that shape and move it anywhere. Here's a G, here's a C, and you can do lesser known ones like say the C shape, which I really like a lot, like this, and move it up. Here's a D in the C shape, where you can just play the middle 4 because it's kind of challenging to play like this. And there's so many cool things you can do with that shape. So that is a way to kind of leverage what you know and learn theory and learn the fretboard a whole lot faster. That's just one example. And another one, to apply it to single note scales, would be thinking about relative major and relative minor. So say we take C, right? C major scale, right? Now that would be C major scale because we started and stopped on C, and say if somebody else was playing a C chord, it would sound like you're playing C major scale. Now if you focus on A, but play the same notes, that would now be the A minor scale, and especially if someone else was playing an A minor, no matter how you played it, if you're trying to play it like C, it would sound like A minor because of that A minor chord, that A note being there, and it's the relative minor. So the relative minor of C is A minor, the relative major of A minor is C, but it's the same stuff. It's the same notes, So don't think of it as two separate things. Just think of it as the same thing, and you can really leverage your time. And if you're confused by the theory at all here, this is not the point. It's the concept you want to focus on and how you can apply this to things you already know and anything new you learn. So there's one challenge that I had when I started playing guitar, because I actually played bass first. And the first big challenge was this, and there's something that really helped me overcome it. So we also want to focus on differences. So it's the other side of the coin, or the pick in this case, right? We want our similarities we want to be aware of, and also our differences. And when I was playing bass, it was nice and easy because it's just these 4 strings and everything it's all symmetrical, right? The way it's tuned. But these 2 strings on guitar are tuned differently. They're tuned down a half step, so you have to compensate by going up a half step, or in this case, one fret, right? So say you take something like C major scale shape, right? This, which is revolving around the A shape from that CAGE system again, right? And you take it from this C. Well, that's not it, right? So you have to go like this, raise this one up by 1 fret, and same thing here, and then change the fingering. Instead of doing this, you do that. So it feels really different, even though it sounds the same, if you did it. So a different shape, but the same sound. And coming from bass, it was like, I had to change these shapes that I had drilled in my fingers, and it was a challenge. But like anything over time, it just gets easier if you focus on those little differences. You kind of that's that little spot there. I got to move it there, and just practice it over and over, and it becomes a part of you. And the same thing too with reading music. I was used to reading in bass clef, then I'd be reading, because I was reading for guitar too, treble clef, and it was it was so challenging that it was a little bit different. But over time, it was like a switch would just go off in my head. I would just be like, bass clef, treble clef, and it was no problem at all. Now with chords, it's good to look at the differences. Say E, right, versus E minor, right? It's just that one note difference, right? It's just, here's an E major, you lower that, it's E minor, and it's actually just 1 fret. So it's 1 note, just 1 little fret, 1 difference makes a huge difference in sound though. So being aware of what's that difference, okay, and seeing that everywhere, and seeing also too, here is say, in the E shape, G, right? and you move it over one string, because of that difference in tuning, that same shape gives you a different sound, right? So same shape, but different sound. So here is major, and this becomes C minor, right? Because of that tuning. One of the most helpful ways to look at differences is with modes. So if we looked at, say, again, C major scale, you know, and A minor is a mode of that kind of, what I call it, kind of like the parent scale. If you just kind of always relate it back to the major scale, there's going to be 7 different scales on those 7 different notes if you're focusing on those. And another popular one, especially for kind of jamming out, is Mixolydian. And for the case of C major, it is the 5th, or it's always the 5th. And that in this case is G, right? So if you play the C major scale, but you focus on G, or you're playing a G chord or a G7, right? That would be G Mixolydian sound. But the difference here between G major and G Mixolydian, or doesn't matter if it's G anything, right? Is it's one note. Here is a major 7th. But if you lower this to an F, that becomes G Mixolydian. So rather than thinking about this parent scale, what is it from? Oh, it's from C major, all this confusing stuff. It's good to know, but really it's much better and easier and more practical to just focus on what's that difference between major and minor. It's one note, it's a major 7th versus a flat 7th for Mixolydian, and that's all you need to know. Now, say another common one is Dorian. If you played, say, the minor scale, Dorian is a mode where all you need to know is that 6th, instead of it being flat, it's major. It's raised up. Again, 1 fret, 1 note, 1 fret. That's all it is. Or easier to play here. I prefer it there in this position. Right? So sometimes you might be listening to, you know, like a jam section of a song, and it sounds like it's minor, and you're not sure, is it major or is it Dorian, you know? And what I do is I just focus in on that 6th scale degree. You know, does that sound like it's this note or that note? And then let your ear determine it. And once you know, then you know it's major or Dorian. And those are the 4 most common, you know, scales that you hear in a lot of popular music, especially when it comes to jamming. You got major, Mixolydian, minor, and Dorian, and actually Mixolydian and Dorian are really the 2 most popular, you know, by far. And you can just really, you know, cut right to learning these fast by just focusing on that 1 note difference. Now, one more thing with noticing the differences when it comes to chords is, say you take D, right? And you take this D shape, and then we play like this, and we play a couple frets up, we play E, and the D shape, right? Now, say you play this with the A shape, so on these strings, so you get this E here to here. Well, you get the D shape, you get the A shape, right? What's the difference? What's the difference? It's just 1 note. This gets moved down there, kind of move it around like that. You can play this note on top too, but say we just play these 4, forget that one. It's just 1 note, again, 1 fret. So a good thing to know is to be aware of that, and then just go back and forth practicing that. Like, okay, you get the same sound, similar sound, or not even similar, same sound, but different shape, you know, and just working out. It's like working out the kinks of something, working out the kinks of the way the guitar is laid out, you know. And you can take it a step further by going to the next set of strings. So up here, this would be in the E shape, right? Boom, up here. But if you don't play these top 2, oops, just those 4, and each shape is different based on the tuning, but it's the same exact sound, and going up and down the fretboard, really working that out. Knowing these cage shapes is fundamental for seeing how chords and scales relate to one another. So it's great to have them all laid out in an organized manner. So I made a free cage cheat sheet PDF. You can check out more info in the description down below. So now let's take a look at an example of looking at similarities and differences. And there's no better song for this than The Wheels on the Bus. You know, it's really easy to dismiss something like this, some annoying kid song, but sometimes those are the best songs for just learning simple little melodies and figuring things out by ear, or, you know, some commercial or something. Like, I just keep an open mind and don't rule things out, because it's a great way to get your ear better and then kind of figure out how the fretboard works and some music theory and see how things relate. So let's take that as just a silly example, right? You've got So it's just playing the notes of A, and I'm doing it in the E shape. We could play at different places, we can play at different keys, doesn't matter, that all is kind of relative to one another. And playing those notes, you know, you can see if I just hold it down, right? And then here, so this is what they call a triad, just the building blocks of the chord. But the, you know, the shape, it's not that, you have to lower it down. So you're gonna see how these differences, you know, these shapes, they sound the same, but the shapes change, and work it out and see how that it just fits right in the chord. You know, so it's just a perfect little example of seeing how a melody fits right in there. So it's really important to learn your chords if you want to get better at soloing. It's not about just scales, but learning chord shapes and seeing how they relate to the melodies and things like that. So you can really focus on leveraging what you know to learn a lot faster by focusing on similarities and differences. So everything I've talked about here has helped me learn music theory much faster. But what I haven't mentioned was how much triads have helped my playing, which is a lot. And there's a specific way that I think about them that really helps. So check out this video here where I show you what it is so you can learn triads as fast as possible.